I'm Dane Rose, and in this exploration, I'm going to explore some of the major patterns, the major maps that can lead to increased awareness and thus increased effectiveness in navigating and understanding reality and life. Perhaps the most important place to start is the fact that reality is really, really big. The reality that we currently conceptualize with literally trillions of stars bigger than Earth, getting bigger, longer. Time is getting bigger and longer. Space is getting bigger and longer every single moment. At the same time that life is becoming more and more complex, newer patterns of energy are taking form in each moment, such that human consciousness, which is a structure of language, can only capture a speck of a speck of a speck of a single moment of what's actually happening. In other words, reality is so much bigger than our ability to conceptualize it, that it's important to understand that what we are relating to is not reality, but a map of reality created by language, created by symbols. Language comes in the form of mathematical language, numbers, and spoken language or written language, words. So we have words and numbers, but neither of them are real. And the reality that we construct out of them is equally an illusion. And although we're in that illusion, right? You and I right now are in an illusion. We're not dealing with reality. Within that illusion, we can conceptualize the illusion through language, in this case, geometry. So the sphere, the whole, the one, the sphere represents the totality of what is, and language divides the one first into polarities of different forms. So we have up and down, left and right. Now, these are illusions. There is no ultimate left or right, right? It's created, the illusion is created with language. The left and the right, the up and down, both halves. It's first of all important to understand that whenever you create a polarity, you create two equal halves. Two equal halves, both of which are necessary to restore, to heal the wound, to heal the whole. And it's useful to look at mythology. You know, we have the myth of the creation. We have every cult, every culture has had its myth. We have the myth of the fall from the garden, from the great one, from the ecology, into the knowledge, into the language of good and evil, into the knowledge of polarity. And that knowledge, that spoken language, gives birth to an infinity of wounds, to an infinity of distinctions, which are created by the geometric combination of words, right? So all the different ways that words can be combined, that creates our language, and all the different ways that numbers can be combined. This is our mathematical language. But it's never real. You know, just because we call something a hand instead of a pand or a sand doesn't mean that it's real. Because the idea of a hand is that the hand stops somewhere around here. But where exactly? If you go down to the subatomic particle, where does the hand end? You see, it doesn't really, because the hand doesn't exist without the arm. The arm doesn't exist without the body. The body doesn't exist without the species. The species doesn't exist without the planet. The planet doesn't exist without the solar system, without the galaxy, without the universe, without the Big Bang. So where is the end of a hand? It's in our mind. It is an illusion because there is no end, right? But we cut the world into pieces that are bite-sized pieces for our brain. Like the one, the infinite whole, can be cut in an infinite number of ways in just one frozen moment that isn't really frozen, because every moment is connected to every other moment. Meaning if we go 1 trillion years into the future and select a moment, which is an arbitrary unit of time, right? Well, let's say the moment is 1 second. Well, why is a second only 60 in a minute rather than 200th in a minute? We just made it up. But if we go 1 trillion years into the future and take a single second as a slice of time, which we can do in our mind, it's not real. There are no slices. It's all connected. That second in time connects to this second in time inextricably. Meaning if you follow the patterns of energy from 1 trillion years in the future to that second in time, you can follow the thread all the way back to the beginning of the universe, which passes through this moment in time. And this moment in time plays a fundamental role in shaping that moment of time, right? You might also say, depending on which way you're looking at it, that that moment in time plays a fundamental moment or a fundamental role in shaping this moment of time. And certainly, what happened in the moments after the Big Bang, which is our current story, our current linguistic model, if the Big Bang didn't happen, we certainly don't have this moment happening, right? So there's a connection throughout all space and all time, right? We like to pretend that this is space and this is solid, right? But these are just different frequencies that we call space, and these are different frequencies we call hands. And see, hands don't penetrate hands, but they penetrate all the subatomic and atomic particles that we call space, right? So we call those patterns space and this hand. There's never nothing there. So all time is connected, all space is connected, and you can divide a second into 1,000th of a second, and you can divide 1,000th of a second into 1 million slices. You just need an observing and measuring device that is refined enough, that is magnified enough, and you can keep dividing a moment infinitely. You can keep cutting a moment in half, just as you can keep cutting space in half. You can say this is a unit here, but you can cut it in half, and you can say these are 2 units, and you can cut it in half, and you can just keep doing that, and as long as you have an observing and measuring device, there is no end to the language of space, to the language of time. And so what we are doing with numbers and words is we're recreating a model of reality. And we're recreating it moment by moment, right? Through our habits of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Our identity, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that we attach ourselves to and say, that's me. Then there are these other patterns of energy all around us that we say, that's not me. Right? But that's also an illusion, right? How can you say, if all things are connected through space and time, that something is me and something is not me? We can say that the I, that we attach ourselves with to a pattern, has more influence in this area, but everything that's happening in any area of space and time has an impact, an influence, affects every other thing that's happening in space of time and time. Physicists say that no energy is created or destroyed. It simply changes form. It transforms rather than transports. It transforms from one form to another form. And a lot of that happens in our mind with language as we see things from a new perspective, right? And so that's when we understand, first of all, that we're not seeing reality, we're seeing a model of reality created by the illusion of language, which is framed on the illusion of separation. Right? We separate this frequency and call it maroon. From this frequency we call blue. We did that, right? But there is a link, right? All the spectrum of frequencies in between blue and maroon exist. And the frequencies up to violet light exist, right? So there are no truly separate colors that exist in isolated bubbles that have nothing to do with all the light in all the other frequencies. It's just useful, right? These delusions of words and numbers are useful. They allow us to navigate within the underlying ecology that is vastly more complex than we can directly perceive, than we can directly participate with. So this is the first thing to understand, is everything that we're dealing with is not real. It is a symbol. It is a metaphor. It is a construct within human consciousness through language that we are often confusing with reality. When we say the word red, we often confuse that sound and the picture we create in our minds with what is actually red. And we also think that red is truly separate from all of these other things, rather than understanding they're all part of a possibility field, of a probability field, in this case, the color wheel, which is a pattern of energy perceived through the observing and measuring devices of our eyes that we've decided to break down somewhat arbitrarily. Computers break down colors into 256 million colors. We might break them down into 7 colors: red, blue, green, yellow, etc. But that's arbitrary, right? You can slice the color spectrum into 1 billion, 1 trillion, or we could just leave it at black and white, or we could just call it one. We could say it's all color, right? Whatever it is, it's color. It's got a color, right? It's how complex is the language, right? And we can divide gray, black and white, into an infinite number of decimal points on an infinite continuum, right? But each of the things that we give a symbol to, we say this is dark gray, this is house gray, this is this gray. They're all made up, right? And once we get familiar with language, we stop focusing and experiencing reality. And we start memorizing. We start referencing the map of reality more than reality. We learn that this is good, and we may start feeling the way that we describe as good because we have a map that says that's good. We may stop experiencing what that feels like, right? So it's also useful to understand that the ego, the I, that attaches itself, that identifies with a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, is tremendously frightened of being out of control, of dying, of pain. The ego is frightened of being out of control because that could lead to death, non-existence for the ego. That could lead to pain. The ego is frightened of pain because severe pain leads to trauma and the dissolution, the radical transformation of the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And then the ego doesn't know who it is feels frightened of confronting the unknown. And the unknown is terrifying to the ego because it's so big. 99.9% of all reality is unknown. Reality is so big that we don't even know that we don't know 99.9% of reality, right? And to kind of just dive into these a little bit, imagine amongst the trillion of stars, which you and I do not have the time to name in a lifetime. Meaning if we start naming stars at the moment we can speak, we will die before we have spoken the symbol of all the stars in the universe. Now, these are massively large shapes, bigger than the Earth, right? We can't even be that crude. So, that's how big reality is. Because reality is the multidimensional experience of each of those stars. And we don't even know that we don't know what 99% of those reality experiences are. Right? We don't know that we don't know a particular star that's 1,000 light years away because it doesn't occur to us. So 1,000 light years away, there is a star, and we don't know that we don't know it because it hasn't occurred to us. We also don't understand how big the small parts of reality are. There is more activity in a single fingertip at a subatomic level than we can keep up with in an entire lifetime. Meaning if we dedicate our entire lifetime to measuring and tracking the activities of just a few molecules a finger, it's moving so fast that we can't say it moved to the left. That one, atom A moved to the left, the nucleus moved to the left and then went to that. It's already moved one atom. We can't keep up with one atom with language, meaning language is so slow in relationship to the speed of life's existence that if we try to verbally map a single atom's activity, it's 1,000 times faster than our brain can make sense of it in language. So we create abstracts which allow us to keep up, right? We can all say the universe is really big, it's all moving very fast, it's growing, it's expanding, it's very complex. And we could say that that's our map of reality, right? And it sounds very pat, right? I'm done, right? I've just described the whole universe. But that's in the abstract. That's applying very, very broad symbolic languages to an infinitely complex body, right? So it's useful to understand that precisely because the ego is incapable, the I, anything we say is me, is so incapable of tracking a single bit of atomic activity in a single atom of a single bit of one finger, right? You could spend your whole lifetime and not catch up with that. And then you just magnify that, 10 trillion times, and you realize you can't possibly keep up with everything else. But what you can keep up with are very crude, reliable patterns as you think the same thoughts with the same people at the same time in the same way for the same purpose, and you can actually get bored, right? You can get bored. You can say, my life is so boring. I wake up at this time, I do this, I drink this, I say the same things. I think, oh, how boring, right? So we can create the illusion of stagnation in a reality that is so vital we can't keep up with a single atom, right? And so we cling to our models of reality, confusing them with reality because we confuse the I with the pattern that the I is attaching to, right? The ego, I, identifies with these patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. It says that's me, right? And on the other side is the vast chaos of the unknown, including our greatest dreams and our greatest horrors. They're both there in equal numbers, right? Because the unknown is spherical. Reality, right? It has this spherical shape, right? You can go as far to the left as you can go to the right, right? So we don't want to experience our fears. We don't want to experience our worst nightmares and traumas. We don't want to feel helpless again. And so we try and protect ourselves from the unknown, which includes those elements. But in doing so, we also block out and control and preclude our greatest dreams, our greatest miracles that are also there in the unknown.